What's going on, everybody? I'm Max Ralph.
Seth Engle.
We are the One and O podcast. Before we get started talking about some Penn State football stuff, we want you to hear about our sponsor. Seth, take it away.
Here's a perfect play from your friends at Want to Know Podcast. Join us taking a trip to Ocean State Job Lot. Not only are they our exclusive podcast sponsor, but they're the premier discount store that takes pride in providing value to us, the Penn State community. And yes, they take Lion Cash. Did you know that Job Lot has all the school supplies like backpacks, notebooks, and more, plus chargers, cords, and cables to keep all of your favorite electronics running all day long? They do. And that's not all. They've got you covered with everything from bedding to health and beauty supplies to tailgating food for the big game. Visit oceanstatejoblot.com today for more information and sign up to be a Job Lot Insider to get exclusive deals.
There you go. Shout out OSJL. I think this week, obviously it's the Maryland game, but I think the big storyline this week, I mean, everybody's kind of been pounding it into the ground, but it's the offensive line. I mean, there are a lot of moving pieces on that unit right now, and it's been interesting to watch. And they came out and despite some bumps and bruises, as James Franklin called it, played really well against Indiana. So Seth, break it down for me.
Yeah, I mean, Penn State is going to repeat this like we do every single week. They are exactly the team that we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the season.
Yeah,
They are a good team. They're a really good team, some could say.
really good team. Yeah.
Are they a great team? Maybe. Are they elite? Definitely not, because they lost to two elite teams this year. And that's like, it's just the same old story. They demolished Indiana. I mean, it was a great game on
Yeah.
all facets. And then when you look at Maryland, I mean, that's a team that I think has exceeded expectations this year. You know, that's a team that is no longer a bottom feeder. It's a competitive offense. Tagovailoa, when healthy, he's capable of being one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. And that defense, I think, is a lot better than a lot of people thought they were going to be, especially when you consider the amount of transfers that, left the program, the past offseason. So, I mean, these are two teams that, could very well compete, but I still think Penn State is just, they're red hot right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting the note you brought up about Penn State. I mean, obviously the great versus elite thing has been talked about a lot, but at least this year, you mentioned the two losses to elite teams. I think that my take on this game is that this is kind of the prove it game for Penn State. After both of those losses to two really good football teams in Michigan and Ohio State, both times Penn State came out and really dominated an opponent that it should have dominated and did it in the fashion that it needed to. And it's kind of like, okay, in years past, maybe you see some of these losses pile up and Penn State's not really proving itself as much as it should be to be a good team. I mean, you saw it with Illinois and Iowa last year. This year, it didn't happen. Penn State has taken care of business every single time thus far. So I think this game against Maryland, like I said, is the prove it game. I think Maryland is a team that's exceeded expectations, has had a pretty good year, has a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. I mean, that's undeniable. But I think Penn State can win this game handily. And I think if they do, that really does prove that it is a strong football team. It is a top tier football team, potentially a top 10 football team. I just think this is the prove it game. But let's talk about the offensive line. There are three starters from the beginning of the season who are missing right now, and we're missing against Indiana. And that unit came out and played well. It's been interesting to watch.
Yeah. I mean, and that's something I look at too. When you look at what defines, an elite and great team, you look at teams that are able to go down and then still be able to compete with their reserves. And when I look at Penn State's offensive line right now, which was a line that struggled a lot last year, the fact that they have reserves who are able to compete with Big Ten teams says a lot about where this program's going. And we look across that O-line right now. I mean, Olu Fashanu has been, undoubtedly one of the best offensive linemen in the country this year. And we're not sure when Penn State's going to get him back, if at all. He's a projected first-round pick. Landon Tangwall is out for the season. Caden Wallace hasn't played in weeks. So, I mean, now you're kind of left with a bunch of freshmen and, redshirt sophomores. But they got the job done against Indiana. And I think that's really promising. And I think looking forward at Maryland, it's really just a matter of, okay, well, can these young guys like Drew Shelton and Venga Ioane, can they come through again? if they're given the opportunity, can they do it consistently? Is a big question.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because you mentioned Fashanu, who honestly the status on him doesn't seem great for Penn State to get him back because Drew Shelton started in his place, and James Franklin has said now multiple times that they'd like to redshirt Drew, but don't really think it's going to be possible. So that might tell you what you need to know. Not
Yeah.
sure. But Drew came in and played a really good game against Indiana and played every snap. And then, you look down the line, Hunter Norzad, who announced he's coming back in 2023, big boost for the offensive line, no matter where he ends up playing. But Hunter Norzad got hurt on the first offensive play of the game against Indiana. And you have JB Nelson come in and play almost every snap in the game and play really well. And then, Juice was solid at center. And right guard, you've got Sal, who's been good all season, but right tackle is Bryce Effner in place of Caden Wallace. And Effner played a good game. And he's a guy who James Franklin has long been calling a starter who's not starting. He's getting reps in every game, switching in at right tackle, a couple interior spots. He's a guy who brings a lot of versatility, but it's just interesting to look at this patchwork offensive line come in and do a good job. And especially it's a different level of depth than Penn State has had in years past. I mean, obviously the talk has always been bad run game, bad offensive line, whatever it is, offensive struggles. But, this year you've got guys who are coming in and aren't supposed to be starters, but are still competing. And, it's one thing to do it against Indiana because Indiana's not a great team, but, still a Big Ten team, still Big Ten competition on the road. Like, you got to give some props to the work that Phil Troutwine and James Franklin have done with that unit this year.
100%. And I think a lot of it goes to recruiting too. I mean, the guys that they have brought in, and you've seen the trajectory go up in terms of recruiting. I mean, we're going to look into the future a little bit here, but I mean, now they're capable of bringing in guys like Javen Williams and Alex Birchmeyer, who, 5 years ago probably would have gone elsewhere to other schools like Wisconsin and Iowa that are known for developing, offensive line talent. But you see guys like Fashanu, who's a potential first round pick, and then guys like Drew Scruggs, who are among the best centers in the country. I mean, that says a lot about where the program has come, and it's really interesting that it's happened in just 1 year. Obviously, process is longer, but the story can really, flip on its axis in just one season. And, I want to highlight some of those young guys again, because I think Penn State's offensive line could be very good next year. If Norzad's able to stay healthy, Drew Scruggs, I believe, has a COVID year of eligibility left.
He does.
If he decides to use that.
I don't know. I mean, if it was me, I'd guess that he probably won't because he's been really good this year, but it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, and if he leaves, then it would most likely be Norzad to take his center position. And I mean, the guys around him. I mean, Venga is really exciting. We've heard a lot about him. Drew Shelton, we obviously saw he was great. JB Nelson, he was maybe even better than Drew Shelton was. And I think he's gone, he's gone kind of like, like underrated in a way. Just based on the fact that Drew Shelton was a 4-star and JB's coming from
Lackawanna. Yeah.
It's just, but it looks like another Lackawanna success story there. So, I mean,
it's interesting. It is, and it's interesting to think about it because these things take time to build. I mean, Penn State hasn't had a good offensive line, a really good offensive line since 2019, and we saw what happened there. And it's the cycle of college football. Unless you're Alabama or Ohio State, like it takes time to kind of recycle these things through. And, especially when you take into account that recruiting was so whack during COVID, like it kind of makes sense that it's coming back around now. And, Penn State's hoping that the work that Phil Troutwine's doing on the recruiting trail can translate into every year's success. But it makes sense that this is the time when Penn State is starting to find its groove just because of the natural progression. But let's wrap this up with a little more Maryland talk. Like I said, I think this is the prove it game, and I do think that Penn State is going to prove it. I do. I think it's kind of funny. I think all four of us, you, me, Zach, and Spencer on the Collegian staff, all said Penn State was going to score 38 points this weekend. Totally arbitrary number, but I think I went with 38-17. I think it'll be a strong showing. I don't know. I keep expecting the offense to underperform my expectations, and each time it has outdone them. I mean, with Minnesota and with Indiana, both times it's like an explosion. And the same thing with Auburn. So I kind of expect a good showing this weekend. And the defense, Maryland's offense is a lot better than Indiana's, but that defense is still swarming, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, it's really funny. You mentioned that we all said 38 points. I don't know why. It just feels like a game that
It
Penn State's gonna
feels
score
right.
38 points, which probably means that they're going to put up like 24
Yeah.
because we think too highly of our predictions. But
Mm-hmm.
this game just screams 38 points to me, just by the way the offense has been playing. Um, I mean, everything is kind of clicking offensively. The tight ends are working, the run game is working, and the wide receivers are playing well. It's just like everything is kind of clicking right now, and the O line is doing well. It seems like a game Penn State's definitely going to win, and I got to give props to Maryland because they're a better team than they've been in the past. This is it's a competitive team that'll put up a fight. They should put up 20 plus, but I think in the end, I got Penn State 38, Maryland 25.
All right. Well, there it is. You heard it here first. Want to know podcast. Thanks for following along. Keep tracking with us online at collegian.psu.edu and on Twitter at PSU Footblog and Want to Know Pod. Peace out.